Indeed. Thank you very much, Oyemi Ajayi, for the background, and our guests are already seated. Let me begin with our guests right here in the studio, Olufemi Boyede, who is a certified international trade professional, founder and president, Nigeria Trade and Investment Center, Canada INC. He's here in Abuja studio. Thank you very much, Mr. Boyede, and good to see you.
Thank you for inviting me. Good morning, Nigerians and viewers all over.
Also with us on the program today is Shuaibu Idris, and he's Managing Director, Timeline Consult Limited. He joins us from our Lagos studio. Good to see you, sir.
Good morning, madam. Once again, thanks for having me, and good morning, Nigerians.
And also we have Dr. Ken Okoha, who is President, National Association of Nigerian Traders. He's joining us via Zoom. You're welcome, Ken Okoha.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Nigerians.
We have Paul Ejime, an international price analyst. He also joins us via Zoom, that is from the United Kingdom. You're welcome, Mr. Paul.
Thank you for having me, and good morning, everybody.
Thank you, gentlemen. You're welcome all once again. It's a topic this morning we need to really do some assessment for a start, and that's talking about the African Continental Free Trade Area, 15 months on, and then trying to see how far so far. Let's get started with Olufemi Boyede right here in the studio. Give us your assessment, 15 months of this very important trade bloc.
Well, I will say is 15 months of actually translating historical antecedents to practical continental trade. Historical antecedents because, of course, we had never needed anybody to teach us to intertrade among ourselves in Africa. If students of history will remember, even before the era of colonization, I think the northern Berber Arabs used to come to West Africa, Central Africa. The further south they went, then you could be talking about traded items like gold, like other precious stones that came from the southernmost part, kola nuts in the Western Africa region, palm oil and stuff. And then we had supply chain. We had the camels that they rode all the way across. So we had trans-Saharan trade before we now started talking about transatlantic trade. So AfCFTA, I think, actually came at the right moment. The review, the introductory review had talked about the low level of trades among African countries, probably more realistically between 4 and 5%, until AfCFTA, and of course we know that there could be major improvement. One, Africa is known, well, most of Africa is known to consume what it does not produce, and then it produces what it does not consume. But that's not entirely true. We produce cocoa and we consume chocolate. Can we actually be said that not to produce or not to consume what we produce? Chocolate is an outcome of, is a derivative of cocoa. And so the AfCFTA, I just use that as a very, very common illustration. The AfCFTA would help us probably to do product differentiation, country differentiation, market segmentation along the supply chain that allows some countries that have comparative advantages either in technology or in cheap labor or in availability of the raw materials to actually specialize. So instead of our chocolate being produced from Switzerland, for example, if Ghana has a comparative infrastructural advantage for the production of chocolate, for example, Ghana might be, that's what I mean by segmentation. You can actually, among the AfCFTA, allocate to some regions or some countries the production of a particular product that is currently termed as imported from the West, for the African market.
That's
The fact that we now have the largest single market supposedly in the world, makes it an even more attractive prospect for production, for industrialization, for technology acquisition and know-how, and of course, the ultimate for the eradication of the exportation of jobs. Because when we send out our raw materials, we are actually sending along with them the jobs that could have been created in transforming these raw materials into products that we consume.
okay.
So so just to cap up to my answer to that, the AfCFTA did come at an appropriate time. It remains a very potential tool for not just increase in trade, but a kind of cascading effect across all the sectors and activities of the African
It came at an appropriate time.
Yeah.
Has it, in 15 months, are we able to make some tangible progress? You can just taking some stock now.
It depends on who are we, the we that we are asking here.
Africa
Because there
generally.
are some, yes, if we are talking Africa generally, there are countries that have already begun to enjoy the benefits of having an Africa single market. There are other countries that are still battling with the understanding of the fact that the AfCFTA means the reduction or outright elimination of protectionist policies and prohibitions, and this it means a free market without trade barriers, with near to zero tariffs and what have you, especially for the consumers within the continent. It's a tool, a trade strategy, a trade tool that actually empowers Africa to be a net exporter of semi and finished products, rather than it changes the narrative, rather than the current state of affairs where we are just exporting raw materials to the industries of Europe and
Mr.
America.
Boyede, thank you. Let's just put you on hold for a while and then bring in Dr. Ken Ukoha, who's also joining us from via Zoom. He's the National Association of Nigerian Traders. Dr. Ken Ukoha, good to see you. Mr. Boyede has just said we have moved from a historical, plate to a practical transition of continental trade. But I ask you, have we really moved, from boardroom negotiations, dotting, the I's and crossing the T's, to the real marketplace? Has trading, buying and selling commenced within the continental free trade area? What exactly is going on?
Okay, thank you very much. Let me try as much as possible to correct this impression. The AfCFTA, very good instrument for the entire Africa for trade, showing about 1.2 billion market share, which is the population of Africa, and which also has the potential of heading to about 3 billion by 2030, 2050. And then also the largest conglomeration of trade in terms of FTA in the world. This is something that everyone in the world is looking towards. However, on the 1st of January, 2021, the AfCFTA was kick-started in terms of implementation. But what has happened till date, and this is where I need to let Nigerians and viewers understand where we are, and this will help us. Where we are at this moment is that no single African country has started the practical trading on the AfCFTA. If anybody tells you that anybody has benefited or, started the trading, it is far from it. What is really happening at this moment? In fact, as we speak now, customs representatives in the whole of Africa are meeting in Accra, Ghana, over the rules of origin negotiations. And that particular aspect of the instruments for the trading of AfCFTA, under the AfCFTA, has to be clearly noted out. And that is not, like we say, it is not agidi. It is not something, it is too technical, deeply technical. And that's why some of us were shouting when the heads of states, the African heads of states, we are talking about deadlines, starting the AfCFTA by 2018, 2020, we were shouting, look, this is a tall order. This is not easy. See how long it took the WTO, and it's been taking them up to this moment to look at the Doha Development Agenda. See how long it has been taking that negotiations on that platform on trade at the multilateral level. And see how long it took us on the EPA between, the ACP and the EU. So the rules of origin is the key instrument for practical trading to take effect. But that particular rules of origin is still under negotiations. Of course, they are right now at this point dotting what I would call dotting the I's and crossing the T's. They have undertaken aspects of the technical details in terms of percentages, in terms of HS codes. This will be highlighted. And don't forget, we are talking about 54, 55 countries of Africa coming together, bringing together all their sensitive products, bringing together all the lines and the exclusive products, and then putting everything in a basket. And people will be negotiating. People will be saying, no. People, there'll be a lot of harmonization process in that particular key. And that is what will now lead us into a common rules of origin that is agreeable and acceptable and endorsed and adopted. And it is only on that particular basis that AfCFTA will practically kick off. On paper, it has kicked off. But then, in practice, it is yet to kick off. By the way, if you kick it off, if anybody's going to benefit, what are you going to benefit? What are you going to trade on? Where are the HS codes? Where are the rules? If customs hold you on the goods, what's tariff are you paying on specific items and commodities? These are the things that are being noted out now. Thank you very much.
Ken Okoha. Can we hear from Shaibu Idris, please, as regards this very issue, talking about this huge market, and against the background of what Ken Okoha just revealed, that it's all a paperwork issue at the moment. It's all a boardroom talk at the moment, because what the heads of governments in Africa are just trying to put across between 2018 and 2021 have been just a mere tall order. It takes a little while before these things come into place and then start yielding some positive results. Give us a perspective of 15 months of AfCFTA.
Of justice to the discourse. Femi alluded to the fact that historically there has always been a trans-Saharan trade between various communities and kingdoms or empires of Africa. Till date, no doubt we've been trading, but not necessarily trading as per the requirement of the AfCFTA, as Dr. Ken has also alluded. When you look at the document and you look at the planning stages of the document or the agreement, you will realize that the expectations by our leaders has been reasonably and fairly watered down. Let me take us down the memory lane. Nigeria was one of the last countries to sign the document. There were enormous amount of discussions on this platform. We contributed our quota as to what were our thoughts as to how this free trade area should operate. I believe two fundamental problems or challenges were faced by the Secretariat of the Trade area. Number one, the corona pandemic. The entire world lost over a year and a half arising from corona pandemic. January 1, 2021. It actually came in during the thick period, in fact, the peak period of corona pandemic. So really the first 6 months of last year we were all in lockdown. So the secretariat couldn't function. By July, when eventually the secretariat started functioning, like Dr. Ken said, discussions on issues such as rules of origin, supply chain, value chain, and other features such as payment mechanism. These are still being discussed and espoused. To say the least, I will score the progress thus far, maybe let's say 10%, in the sense that actual trading has not commenced, even though within the continent there are certain economic blocks, the ECOWAS, the COMESA, and trading has always been done along those economic blocks. So trading is being carried on, however, not necessarily within the ambit or platform of the AfCFTA. I believe the future, holds a lot of promises. We are likely going to see light at the end of the tunnel. Remember, we had issues or challenges that we espoused at the beginning of, the agreement. Number one, logistics and supply chain, the border control issues, the rule of origin that is being discussed, the payment mechanism. I need to buy an item in Ghana. I have to either get a euro or dollar or Japanese yen or Chinese yuan to be able to do my trading between myself and a brother or sister from Ghana, or even my neighbor here in Cotonou. The Afrexim Bank has come in with a laudable initiative called the Pan-African Payment System. If this gateway is finally established and is tested to run perfectly well, it will fundamentally reduce the cost of transaction. It is estimated that even if we were to implement the free trade area as it were today, and we have to do payment via external currencies such as the euro and the dollar, we will be paying, or rather customers or the business owners will be paying close to about $5 billion annually on transaction fees alone. This figure is enormous. I think there are other political undertones that we must not, fail to mention. Countries are still rivaling one another, and there are exogenous, forces like the European Union somehow, quote and unquote, trying to undermine the efforts of integration of Africa. But I think we are on a trajectory, and we are on a bit of a roller coaster ride that we are likely going to see light at the end of the tunnel. The thing is, our policy makers, our political leaders, and indeed those of us in the private sector needs to do even more. We need to roll our sleeves, we need to have a can-do attitude, and we need to make sure that this is a success. These numbers that we real, 1.3 billion population, We need to interrogate that number. 1.3 billion population. What is the economic capacity? What is the purchasing power? Okay, we have a 3.4 or 3.5 trillion GDP. How much is that GDP from actual economic activities of, say, manufacturing or adding value to a product? Like Dr. Ken has said, you produce cocoa, you send it to Germany or Europe to produce chocolate and bring back, or like we do in Nigeria, you mine oil, crude oil, and you send it abroad to get it refined, and we get this, petroleum and diesel and other produce. This has to change. We need to regurgitate. Our leaders need to take a critical look at the industrial development and what to do and how best to fast track our industrial development.
Shaibu Idris, thank you. A fantastic points that you have raised, and we're still at the clarification of concept point, and would like to bring in the perspective of Paul Ejime, international affairs analyst, who is also joining us via Zoom from the United Kingdom. Paul, economic integration does not happen overnight. If we look at the models, specifically if we look at our ECOWAS model, it happened in phases, and it took quite some time, for each of those phases to be completed. Are we being too expectant? Are we in a haste, considering the fact that the processes, each phase doesn't happen overnight? So for those of us evaluating 1 year on, 15 months, after takeoff, how far? Are we being too expectant?
So, thank you. You know what? I don't think, in fact, if Africa were to go by how the founding fathers from independence, AU, let's start from there. If we were to go by what they had laid out on the plans, because you now have plans and then the execution or implementation, in fact, all these things should have happened yesterday or years ago. Remember, we had the Lagos Action Plan. We used to have of 80 to 2000. Africa used to have the African Economic Community Treaty of 1991, which also talked about what, all of them mention what AfCFTA is talking about. Then you had Nepal. We are now talking about, you had the Commission of Africa, or the Tony Blair Commission. You also, the AU is now talking about Agenda 2053. And now we are talking about Free Trade Area, or AfCFTA. All these are things that should have been harmonized, or they have been talked about in the past, but there hasn't been any follow-up, because that is where the problem is. And how do you do the follow-up? It works in two ways. You have the soft and then the hard. The soft, the soft will, let's begin with the hard. The hard is that what is happening now, because you have to move from known to the unknown. What is the level of interaction in terms of trade among African people, African countries, where we're talking about 1.3 billion or whatever? It is hovering between 11 and 15%, my sister. And you cannot go, compared to other regions, is infinitesimal. Much of what is happening is trade is going on, is informal, but you notice that African countries are doing more business with foreigners or partners than they are doing among themselves. That is where you ought to have started, to know, what do you have? What does Ken have that I don't have? What does Ghana have that Nigeria? Because at times you even go to get what you have in your Sokoto dress. you start going to Sokoto to go and look for it. That is part of the policy problem. So the hard will be to bring the infrastructure, the knowledge, the information, sensitization, to know where we are. My neighbor, what do you have that I can get? What does, you start from there before you now begin to go outside. In doing that too, remember, what are we trading on? What is it? Even the trade between African countries and the others is more extractive, commodities, on process, like they said. But you need to move to the add value through the semi-finished and then finished product. That is when you gain. Now the big elephant is infrastructure. You know farmers or you produce, how do you move? Even within countries. Then you now talk about between countries. These instruments that I've mentioned, the Lagos plan, the Abuja African Economic Community, Nepal and others, they have mentioned, there is even what we call the PIDA, the program on infrastructure for Africa development in Africa. That is where you ought to have started. How is it now? What is the movement? How do farmers move? How do produce industries? Are they able to move their products? The transportation? The point was that what you call the 8 regional economic communities were supposed to be the engine that will drive this economic development, because that is what AfCFTA is talking about. How you can catalyze African trade, promote it in a way that you bring increase, add value, and bring employment before you now begin to talk about gain. We can measure what we're talking about. What is, do they know what we're talking about in terms of this free trade? I can tell you it is not, if you took a census or a study, you will notice that most of them do not know what we're talking about. So having finished that hard area of developing infrastructure, you now move to the soft. That is the policy. What is the policy, trade policy of all the countries? 55 African countries, about 54 have signed. Only Eritrea hasn't. 42 have ratified. But what is happening internally? Because you can't give what you don't have. You have to have that internally, regionally, before you talk about continental level. It is still at very intuitive, it's still not what to write home about. That is why you have problem with moving from borders. I hear people, Ken and others are talking about rules of origin, and then even moving across borders. Occasionally, even within these REX, you hear countries, countries, it won't work when you now begin to, it will be putting the cart before the horse. So you need to get it right, both at the national level, regional level, before you now move to the continental. It's not bad to have an ambitious, instrument or tool like this, which is wonderful. But
we seem to have some real problems there with the connection from UK, talking about, Paul Ejime there making his own points. But all the same, we'll get back to him when the, network gets better. Let's come back to the studio here and hear from Mr. Boyer there. Generally now, Africans, do not trade so much between themselves, given the statistics we have. Generally, it's been said it's about 17% of trade between Africans, and of course, more than 50 with the Asians, and more than 52 rather with the Europeans out there. So generally, the AfCFTA would want to really change this narrative. And in doing that, which is a very big, ambitious, strategy to make Africa a sort of the centerpiece of its economic policies, it's one would think that there would be some timelines in this, in trying to get across to this. Timelines being set aside. And what Ukoha is saying is that we're still on the point of trying to get the origins thing sorted out, and of course trying to see how the the basic foundation could get across. What do you think is the fault to the timelines, or is there any problem with the political will of our leaders?
I don't think so. I don't think there's any problem anyway. I was privileged to be at the very, 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 very beginning of the discussion of the Doha Development Agenda in Cancun, Mexico, in 2003. I was an ITC resource person where that talk started. Are we still talking development today, 19 years after? My answer is yes. Nigeria, okay, maybe reviewed and then ratified the Common External Tariff 2021 to 2026 just last week. Was there trade going on in ECOWAS? Were people able to trade among themselves and trade beyond their borders, even importing from China and others? Did we have an instrument that is guiding? The tariff mechanisms in the EU, are they the same and did they come in one day? The answer is no. So the people who said Rome was not built in a day are correct. So I agree entirely with Ken, Dr. Okaha's fears, concerns about the rules of origin. But I do not think that the fact that rules of origin have not yet been agreed becomes a reason why we say that AfCFTA has not taken off. AfCFTA has taken off. The vision has been articulated. I remember, permit me to go into the Holy Book. There was a king who expressed his desire to drink water from a particular well in a troubled environment. He only expressed his desire, and his mighty men, the strong people, the Ken Ukauhas and other policy strategies, they decided we have to do what the king wants. So they went to that well and fetched the water for him, and he drank. So the leaders of Africa want a paradigm shift, a change in the narrative, a formalization of what has been going on centuries informally, a formalization of it. They have expressed that, they have signed that, they have told us, the foot soldiers, this is where we are going. So it is up to us. Timelines, yes.
Yeah.
We cannot continue forever. It cannot be let loose. They can set a timeline and say, okay, within 2 years, we want these rules of origin and whatever other impediment is addressed.
I don't think Dr. Ken is denying the fact that informal, activity or trade, it's going on. He's not denying that. But
No, he never.
Yeah, no, he doesn't. He accepts. He acknowledges.
Yes.
He acknowledges also that the package you are talking about, the packaging of what has been going on, historically, has been done as agreed by the president, has been done. But he is saying, from his perspective, until the rules of origin, which has also been an issue even with the implementation of the other models, integration models, specifically ECOWAS. It's been an issue with ECOWAS, and that's why we have a lot of dumpings of products in our country. So he is saying until that is finalized for him,
I have no objection to what he said. I'm only saying, in essence, that the fact that we are still working on the rules of origin does not demean in any way from the progress that has been made on AfCFTA. That's what I'm saying.
Beautiful. So let's also take the ball now to the court of Dr. Ken Ukoha and look at tariff liberalization, assuming every other policy harmonization has been made and all that, and we are ready to kick off to do import and export activities within the free African continental free trade zone. And there is tariff liberalization on 90% of goods. What do we have? Okay, I'm told we don't have him online, but when we do have him, that's a question. So, Shuaibu Idris, please, can you take that? Do we have the products to sell?
Thank you, Claire. Yes, of course, we do have products to sell. But before I go into that question, let me clarify one fundamental, position that I think we are getting a bit wrong from my own perspective. To say that African countries trading in between the continent is about 11, 15, or 17% that are being bandied. I think we are looking at trading an official level. The underground economy, the unregistered economy in Africa is probably 3 or 4 times the actual, registered economy. When you trade between a country in Africa with, say, China or US or Europe, you can't do without either going through a letter of credit, bills for collection, and other mechanism of trading. So that is registered. But when I'm buying an item, say from Nigeria, and taking it through God is Good, GIG, from Lagos to, say, Accra, Ghana, or to take it via Young Shall Grow to Lomé or Niamey, those are seldom recorded. So if we are to have what I can call a guesstimate, guesswork plus estimation, the actual intra-African trade may be in the region of 30, 40, or even 50% if we are to aggregate the trade. Now, AfCFTA, if we are able to implement, the payment mechanism, and we simplify, the payment system, everything can then go into the mechanism and to the silo via the tunnel, and then everything will then be registered. Now, back to the question, do we have produce, or do you have product to market and to sell? Yes, we do. Let me begin with, say, Nigeria, and in particular, crude oil. Why wouldn't, say, Egypt, Kenya, say Congo or Ethiopia buy their crude oil from Nigeria? Don't we have a produce to sell? Yes, we do. Today, our farmers are producing, quite a number of grains and other agricultural produce that are being demanded, by other African countries. These are commodities that we can sell. Today, we have one of the largest fertilizer, manufacturing plants in Nigeria. Why wouldn't we export that fertilizer? Morocco has been trying to sell fertilizer across the length and breadth of Africa. South Africa has enormous amount of manufacturing base, including high-tech equipment. Within Africa,
Well, it seems we've also lost, Shuaib Idris there from Lagos. Let's come back to the studio here and then see what justice we can make to this issue of products. And of course, the tariff issue and the barriers, crossing the barriers, trying to break them down. That's the basic essence of, the AfCFTA, trying to make, trading accessible within African countries. And if one can really recall, I think the Director General of the, World Trade Organization, Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, once said that one of the ways we can have a smooth and then, of course, a functioning of markets is to have borders that are very easy to cross, right? Vis-a-vis or juxtaposing this with the trading blocks we have in Africa, ECOWAS and the rest of them.
SADC.
If we have this on the ground, it seems the whole lot of breaking the barriers have been made easy for AfCFTA to move on. What's your take on this issue of trying to see to it that Africans really trade very much officially, as Shuaibu said, much more and then recorded as we do with the Europeans and the Asians?
Yeah, I actually, it's a pity that we lost Shuaibu. He was on a thread there, and you saw me nodding and gesticulating. The truth is, if you went into the market of Niamey today or Tokwa market in Cotonou, Benin Republic, you are likely to find products, not just commodities. I'll make reference to a company in Kaduna. I don't know if they're still there, but I know way back 1999 when I led a team of Nigerian companies to a solo exhibition in Sierra Leone, Nokaku, Northern Nigeria cable manufacturing companies, manufactured electrical cables that were rated as like two times better than what was coming out of China at that time. And Nokaku actually was mandated or was requested to provide all the electrical cables for an infrastructural project going on in Sierra Leone. We have advantages of trading among ourselves, even in manufactured products. There was a time when Nigeria and Ghana had a Nigeria-Ghana highway. I don't know what made the political economic relationships to kind of degenerate or wane down. But the truth is, in the days of pharmaceuticals, I know that there was an exchange of pharmaceutical products between Nigeria and Ghana that actually Nigeria Export Promotion Council initiated as at that time. I know that for things like beverages, for example, if they're not coming from Nestle in Cote d'Ivoire, they are actually coming from Nigeria. And just like I was telling you off the air at that time, 80% of the things that are sold in most of these West African markets actually originate from a country like Nigeria. So trade is going on, like Shaibu Idris said, but 80% of it, for example, is not being recorded. And that's where, to answer your question, that's the relevance of the AfCFTA. The idea is not to create a trade. We cannot reinvent the wheel. We cannot compel Africans to trade among themselves, which they are already doing. It is now a process of formalizing, of capturing. And this is where the threat is. Because if the trade that is going on among African countries is actually officially captured, it will transcend the figures that we are bandying around here. And then it makes Africa to become a much stronger, much bigger, much more active economic power than presently we are being seen as. That's where the AfCFTA needs to be made to work.
Okay, I know you don't have you have very limited time with us, but
yes,
in terms of revenue projection, from the African free trade market, what is our projection, trade projection, and do our manufacturers at the moment have the capacity to drive that projection?
Good question. Good question that calls into question or that challenges or motivates our preparation. Somebody talked about success, or is it progress being opportunity meeting with preparation? We're here in the studio talking about all of this. Ken is somewhere, Paul is in the UK, and then we are addressing issues of the environment, the business environment, the legal framework for relationship. But the truth is, this is the time when Nigerian manufacturers and producers are supposed to take advantage of, to actually prepare so that we can have something to quantify. As of today, I think this must be the 21st or 22nd year of the existence of the Africa Growth and Opportunity Act, which the United States of America put in place, AGOA, which they put in place to encourage African manufacturers. Nigeria's figures in AGOA are actually the exportation of crude oil. It's not in the products and services wherein we have comparative and competitive advantages. It's because there was no deliberate preparation to take advantage of that particular specialized market. The same holds true of AfCFTA. If all of these issues that we have thrown up today if everything, as I say, all things being equal, if everything was equal, is Nigeria ready to actually take advantage? Has somebody done an inventory of the products? I'm not talking of commodities now. We don't want that. How much farm gate processing is going on? For example, if the crazy picture I painted, but it's good to be crazy to think that's outside the box, were to happen, for example, and we said Ghana should produce chocolate for the whole of Africa. And Nigeria's cocoa industry was supposed to now become a sub-supplier, a third country supplying to the emerging industry of chocolate. Are we going to send fermented cocoa beans alone? Or can we have capacity to do farm gate processing in Nigeria, wherein the people in Jos, I don't know how many millions or billions of naira is lost to the tomatoes and potatoes that are wasting because there is no trade infrastructure. I believe that Nigeria's trade infrastructure still needs a lot of upscaling, upgrading. I believe that not just in the area of policy and not just in the area of political will. Yes, political will is required, it is necessary, but then the private sector, the manufacturers themselves, what are they doing? AfCFTA is doing a lot in terms of sensitization.
Is it what
a
are
component.
they doing? Is it what are they doing, or what can they do given the right atmosphere and right environment?
What can
we have to let it go.
What can they do if there is no what do you call it, a deliberate strategy to actually prepare? I will take, for example, and say AfCFTA market. Maybe it's going to take Ken and his team another 2 years to give us a commonly accepted rules of origin, and the trade is going to take off. Do we have 100 Nigeria companies? And I think I will challenge my colleagues at the Nigeria Export Promotion Council to look at this as a possible way of thinking and say, okay, let's prepare, let's have a model project that prepares 200 Nigerian companies across 10 different sectors, industrial sectors and this thing, that will be ready to fly Nigeria's flag on the AfCFTA single market when it does eventually take off. Then we can bring back figures of how much we have been doing. Thank you.
Okay, many thanks, Olufemi Boyede. We thank you so much. Olufemi Boyede is a certified international trade professional and founder, president of Nigerian Trade and Investment Center Canada Incorporated. It's our pleasure. We hope to see more of you, much more in days ahead, talking about trade and AfCFTA. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Before we take the break, let's go back to Ken Okoha and then maybe get your closing thoughts, or rather, let's hear you talk about the closing. I mean, your thoughts about what really are we looking at now in AfCFTA, at least in the next 1 year. By the time we come back here again next year, what are we expected?
Quickly, one is that I will just do a follow-up from where so key on which is the key to AfCFTA. Let's call there are 6,129 tariff lines that have been selected under the AfCFTA. And of course, 184 of these 6,129, which is 3%, are exclusive or under exclusive list. And under the sensitive list, we have 429, which is about 7%. Therefore, the remaining 5,512, which is 90% coverage, are the items, if you like, the tariff lines that need to be liberalized. Now, this is exactly what is going on, what they are working on, the technical people are working on, the HS code on the items and all the tariff lines and all of this under this particular 5,512 lines. Now, but beyond the issue of, the issue of rules of origin, the essence of this is that we want to be sure that goods that are coming in from third parties like China, the Asian countries or Europe and all that are not coded into, or surreptitiously brought in as originating goods. That's very key. The next point is that there is going to be a training of the trade facilitating agencies like the customs. We have NAFDAC here. We have Standard Organization of Nigeria and other agencies that are, representative on the trade facilitation platform. This is very, very monumental. And then we need to also move ahead to look at other issues. For instance, we have to understand what is the trade policy that we have today and good enough. The country, both at the regional level, ECOWAS, and Nigeria, they are all looking at their own templates of having a trade policy at their ends that will help. Now, there also need to be a serious alignment between agriculture and industrial policies with our trade policy, so that whatever we are doing will grind up into development. We also need to look at consumer tests for foreign goods, which we must limit. And then the poor export promotion, that we have, orientation that we have, would also need to be looked at so that we will have also domestic patronage of our products. And I don't think we have enough time. I would have driven us to very other issues like what the rules of these agencies, ministries are.
All right. Dr. Ken Ukoha, I'm sorry to interject here. Thank you. Let's also bring in quickly Shuaibu Idris to speak briefly on his own perspectives. And I'm wondering, Mr. Idris, if in terms of positioning the country as a major player in this market, are we channeling our policies to stimulate manufacturing and production of products in the right areas?
I think Nigeria never ever lacks policies. We have the policies, and the policies are in place and they are being implemented. The challenge is implementation, and indeed in every project you need to have an M&E, a monitoring and evaluation mechanism. Claire, let's take a quick look at cement, for example. In the last 50 years, Nigeria has been a net importer of cement. When Obasanjo decided, when he became president, civilian president, he decided that Nigeria must not import cement, given the preponderance of limestone in the country. Today, what is our position? We are net exporter of cement. The same thing is now going on in sugar. We can produce sugar cane. We can farm and produce sugar cane, which is the raw materials for production of sugar. Nigeria today is a net importer of sugar, raw sugar from Cuba, from other countries, and just refined and sold. Today, we are, even yesterday, it was on one of your news items that the National Sugar Council is pushing that Nigeria must must achieve self-sufficiency in sugar production. I can go on these policies. Wheat, for example, we are spending close to about $500 million annually to import wheat from US, from continental Europe. We are now making efforts to produce wheat locally. Do we have the energy? Do we have the policy? Yes, we do have. However, the implementation, like I said, is the challenge. So government should, by a matter of urgency and policy, should have a monitoring and evaluation mechanism that will ensure that once a policy is rolled out, at every step, we need to take a look at what did we set out to achieve? Where are we? How have we been able to move forward? The same thing, like we are discussing this AfCFTA, it's akin to planting a mango tree or a cashew nut tree. Do you want to plant a mango tree and pluck the mangoes by 1 year or 18 months? Is that possible? Certainly no. So we need to nurture, we need to water the.
Well, certainly no, really, but we must really thank you out there. But finally, we really need to hear from Paul Jim at least in 30 or 45 seconds. Your final thoughts on this issue. Where are we supposed to be by this time around next year?
Sorry, technology has failed us, but let me just say that, you know, some of the panelists raised their hope that perhaps we are making progress. And yet, they have, in their concluding statements, they have also mentioned the problem areas. We cannot put, you know, a superstructure on a structure that is weak. Let us begin from the beginning. Nigeria is the most populous nation. More than 200 million of all, whatever, 1 point something we are talking about. And internally, has Nigeria gotten it right? Of course, we will not say, well, if Nigeria, we need to wait until Nigeria does that. But for us to be able to benefit from this, you know, you have to have, you know, harmonization, both at the national, at the regional, and then the continental level. It is not happening now because of what they are mentioning here. The challenges of implementation. It's not enough to have an ambitious structure. You need to make it work.
Okay, thank you so much, Paul Ejime. It's a pleasure being part of the discussion this morning, and then I really would want to have much more time in weeks and months to come and discuss much more on the AfCFTA. We thank you so much, and we thank also Shaibu Idris from Lagos and Dr. Ken Okoha for your contributions this morning on Good Morning Nigeria. We'll now take a break, and when we come back, we talk about football funding in Nigeria.
All right, welcome back. If you've just joined us, you're watching Good Morning Nigeria. And by the way, congratulations to Arsenal fans. They showed Chelsea boys what soccer or football meant yesterday by defeating them 4 goals to 2. But that's, of course, what you get when football is well funded. And that's our next topic for the moment. How do we go about funding Nigerian football? In just a moment.
And of course, Claire, you're just lucky. Kingsley is not here this morning. You could have gotten a very nice reaction to this statement you made about Chelsea. All the same, right?
I am Arsenal.
You will hear that right now.
All right.
Okay, right now we have in the studio here Nelson Ene is Executive Director, GTI Asset Management Trust Limited, and Project Director, the Nigeria Football Fund, TNFF. Let's start from there. TNFF, what is it all about?
Good morning, thank you. TNFF is the Nigerian Football Fund. It's actually a novel initiative, private sector initiative, to pool funds to intervene in our sports sector. And the focus of the fund is the business aspect of our sports, which we believe requires a lot of funding now to revive that area of our sports. So the TNFF is trying to build a football economy in which football and other sports will be able to contribute significantly to the gross domestic product of the country, just like it's obtainable in other developed countries in the world. So what we are trying to do is to ensure that our sports sector, football and other sports, become very vibrant, well-funded, to create liquidity in the system, and to also create some level of stability for growth, to ensure that a lot of these talents we have in this country, they are properly harnessed to bring glory to Nigeria and also for their own socio-economic benefits too.
You talked about business aspect of sports.
Yes.
I don't get it. So what aspects of sports will this fund be, targeted at?
Yes, like I mentioned earlier, the fund is going to be targeting the business aspect of sports. If you look at sports, just like the Arsenal you mentioned now,
yeah,
and the match you watched yesterday,
yeah,
I can see your excitement about that match. But beyond what you see on that field is a whole big business component of that match going on.
Okay.
The sports betting industry, they are taking their bets, and billions and trillions of dollars are exchanging hands. What about the gate takings? You can see all the electronic billboards. A lot of adverts running on those boards. You in Nigeria can watch a match in England live and direct, and I'm sure you're not watching the match for free. You're also paying to watch the match. So if you look at that, that's the business component we are talking about. There are basic standard business principles running sports all over the world, and Nigeria is here to catch up with that system of running our sports. Our sports is basically government funded now. It is more of social than business. But beyond socials, sports is both social and business. And it is that business area that we have not actually focused on in this country that this fund is trying to focus on, because there's quite a lot of value that even a lot of investors, yourself inclusive, and other investors in the country, institutions, can benefit from returns on investment in the sports sector. Let me go back just for the benefit of listeners. If you look at the Olympics we watched today, some people are tempted to think that it is the government that is funding the Olympic movement. The Olympic movement does not collect any money from government. What they do, they focus on the business component of sports, which evolved more as social. And after a while, when they were finding a lot of problems trying to organize the events, in fact, the Olympic got to a point where they felt the Olympic has completed its life cycle and it was going to go into extinction. And they had to sit back and look at the old process, the old approach, which is what we are trying to do now. Nigeria needs to sit back, look at the old sports sector, look at the old architecture of the sports sector, and see whether we are operating in line with international best practices when it comes to professional sports and sports business. And that is where the real money is. The Olympics generate a lot of money, and it is even from the money they generate after the Olympics, they have the Solidarity Fund that even distribute money to all national Olympic committees all over the world. Over 200 national Olympic committees we are talking about. It is from the fund, the money the Olympic generates, that they distribute to those NOCs and also the continental bodies, because each continent has a body that is also connected, affiliated to the
how
Olympics.
will this fund change the fortunes of Nigerian football?
Yes, again, this fund, what we are trying to do is to pull these funds to intervene in the infrastructure. Like the match, let me just use the match yesterday as a strong case study for this fund. If you look at the kind of facilities you have in that stadium, if you look at the whole approach, the system, the technology driving everything, you discover that it requires a lot of funding. So the essence of this fund is we pull these funds together, intervene in that critical aspect of our sports, deploy the funding to upgrade all our infrastructures, deploy the funding to upgrade our media and broadcasting, because media and broadcasting plays an important role in football. You could watch Arsenal. Did you watch any Nigerian league that was played yesterday? You're so excited about Arsenal. No. It was not on air. And that is a huge component of revenue that the country is missing, because in sports business, TV rights carries almost about 60 to 70% of the revenue generated. So if we are even taking it just from that simple case study, you can see what we are talking about. That is football. What about basketball? What about wrestling? We all watch WWE. WWE is not just there for the excitement of the wrestlers fighting on the ring. We watch the UFC. We watch the NBA. Behind all those activities you see on TV, there's huge business component behind driving it. That is why those athletes are highly paid. They are not paid from government contributions or from donations or grants.
How much are we looking at now in terms of, yes?
In terms of the funding, our initial offer is 5 billion, but it's an open-ended fund. Naira. 5 billion naira is an initial offer. We are actually looking at hundreds of billions of naira, because a lot is required to intervene in our professional sports to activate those components of revenue. And I must say this, when I say hundreds of billions, it looks as if the money is so huge, but I know we have the capacity to raise that kind of money in this country. Studies have been carried out to see how much Nigerians even pay for just sports betting in this country. We are talking of hundreds of billions. Nigerians are the ones paying that. Studies have also revealed that even just the little boy who is going out to viewing centers to pay 100 naira also runs into several billions of naira in a year. So meaning that the country has the capacity. We have a youthful population of about 140 million. If we go by the estimation of our population of 200 million, the youths comprising 70%. These youths are not just youths. Nigeria, based on natural comparative advantage, has been blessed with a lot of talented youths when it comes to sports, not only in football, in athletics, in wrestling, boxing, and other sports. What this fund is trying to do, how do we create job opportunities for all these youths? We are talking about youth restiveness all over the world. If you go to America, you go to Europe, they've used sports to engage a lot of the youths. Not only engaging them by keeping them busy, sports has also made a lot of difference in their lives. And that is why today, in professional sports, the sports employees are the highest paid in the world. What they earn is unimaginable. They earn that money because of the business behind the whole sports, the whole sports system. So that is what we are trying to bring to Nigeria. If you look at the last Olympics, just to buttress the level of talent we have in this country, athletes of Nigerian descent representing other countries won more medals than the one won by Nigeria as a country. What does that tell us? That means we have a lot of talents we need to pay attention to.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, now, when you talk about raising this fund, you talk about 5 billion naira for a start, and of course, there's a huge...
Because it's an open-ended
fund,
yes.
really. How do you intend to raise this fund? Looking at, when you give example with Olympics and some, European League and the rest of them, these are, sports activities that are taking place in developed countries who must have gotten the basics of life and are more or less into trying to make life much more better. Here people are struggling to really make ends meet and trying to make up and trying to come up with this kind of initiative right here. Wouldn't that be so much of a problem to you guys as you move on?
No, we don't think so.
No.
Because the same struggling people are the ones paying their subscription to watch the EPL.
Right.
The same struggling people are the ones still going to viewing centers to pay 100 naira to watch football.
Yeah.
It's all about value creation.
Okay.
When you create value, people will pay for value.
Talk about the value there. How do you intend to do that so that people can now pay more for the value?
Yes, the value, like we have said, the first step is
because we want to watch now at least Nigerian League and whatever.
The first step is to raise the funding to intervene in putting the basic infrastructures in place to drive these revenue components. Because if those infrastructures are not in place, you can't generate the revenue. Again, the funding is also going to focus on talent development. We have the talents, but we need to develop them to get to a level where their performance can be appreciated by people and they are willing to pay for them. Two, we have to also improve
local talent or foreign
local talent. Yes, it's local talent. The fund is focusing on developing our local football economy. Are you going to go
to we used to have a program catching them young, right from either secondary school or primary school stages. At what stages are you targeting?
We are going to be looking at the developmental stages from a very youthful level. And we are also going to use a lot of incentives to drive that process. It's about motivation and incentive. If you incentivize these people properly, you get the best out of them. What about the technology component? The technology component is huge, and we also need to invest in technology. Technology drives the old system. Again, we also need to use this fund to intervene in the human capital development. Human capital development goes beyond the talent playing the football or acting on the field. There's a huge backroom personnel that is required to be trained and retrained over time. We're talking about coaches. We are even going to start having what you call football sports video analysts.
Okay,
so it requires quite a lot of training. These are people, so if you look at the valuation of what we are talking about, there's a huge multiplier effect, spillover effect on various sectors of the economy, tourism, the aviation industry, the merchandising industry, textile industry. So you find out that quite a lot can be achieved with this, and a lot of jobs are going to be created, not only in the sports sector, even in other sectors, you have in developed countries.
There was a time in this country when Adidas used to be the sole, footwear for sportsmen and women, and then Nike came up. Now you have a lot of brands. it would be nice to also have a brand, a homegrown brand.
Homegrown brand to support our
to
sport.
support us at sports. But that aside, you may wish to respond to it. I'm like, why football? Already, football has substantial attention, both from the private sector and even from government. There are other aspects of sports. Athletics, for instance, requires funding. It requires development. What's the push for football and not athletics?
Like I said in my intro, we called it a football fund, and I said by extension to other funds, to other sports, meaning the fund is not restricted to only football. It's also going to other sports can access the fund. But like we said, if you look at sports generally, all sports have their social aspects, they all have their business aspects. Even tennis you watch today, there's a huge business component of tennis, basketball, wrestling, boxing. Imagine the kind of money a boxer in the world, just a fight in one night, earned $300 million. People should even be asking themselves, who paid for that who paid that $300 million? No government pays it. No government will pay any individual $300 million. But somebody earned $300 million in just one day. How? Because the sports experts and the business people sit down to look at the fight and look at it purely, not just two people fighting on the ring. They look at it purely from the business perspective. What is the business? How many eyeballs who want to watch this boxing contest all over the world beyond that venue? So it is not limited to the number of people sitting in that venue. That is just the
and that's a big gap missing.
And you see billions of people wanting to watch that boxing fight. Then they go for pay-per-view. Imagine if you have 1 billion people watching that fight, and the 1 billion people are just paying $1 as pay-per-view. That means only from TV rights, they raised $1 billion. So if they are paying that boxer $300 million, you can see that even the promoters of that fight still have something to go on.
Nelson, I would want to give maybe 15 or 20 seconds to, talk to sport enthusiasts in Nigeria about this fund.
Okay, yes, to the sports enthusiasts and also to prospective investors. When I mean prospective investors, we are talking of individual Nigerians who can invest in this fund. We are talking of institutions, public and private institutions. We are talking of high net worth investors. We are talking of the billionaires in this country. This is a very organized platform with serious corporate governance structure for the management and deployment of this fund. For all of them to invest in this fund, it's a minimum of 100 million naira for the fund. Then you can to access this fund, you can reach us on our website, tnffgti.com.ng. Telephone number 09082999291. And you can also come to our office, number 4, Tinubu Street, Central Business District, Marina, Lagos. So you can reach us on any of the platform, or just go to Google and just type the Nigerian Football Fund.
Okay,
you actually gain access to that website, and you can now download the form, fill the form, and pay online for the subscription.
Thank you so much, Nelson Ene. Of course, we thank you so much for your insights talking about football fund in Nigeria and then the Nigerian Football Fund. We wish you all the best.
Thank you very much.
And that's Good Morning Nigeria for today. Join us again tomorrow for another edition. My name is Yusuf Dadabosum. Bye-bye.
I am Claire Adilabo Abdul Razak. Always remember to join us in the fight against rape and breakers. From all the boss here, GMN Production Group. Have a good time.